Sup everyone, welcome back to another video, and of course in this video we have to talk about Neuvillette and Wriothesley. That's the names I'm sticking with. I know every different video, even within the same video, these people's names are like changing forms throughout the video. So I'm sticking with Neuvillette and Wriothesley, okay? That's it. Continuing, we're going to be talking about both of these characters, what they are potentially going to do for you, your team, and maybe I'm going to dip my toe a little bit into their future prospects. Now, do remember, this is pre-Hydro Archon release. What the hell does that mean? That means these characters are not at their full potential yet. Just like when Nilou and Cyno came out last year right before the Dendro Archon. So it's not fair to fully analyze these characters even when they're released. So we're just going to take this one step at a time. All right, so let's start with Neuvillette, because I know most of you guys are going to be here for Neuvillette. Don't worry, Wriothesley fans, I got you. Wait for the later half of the video. Starting with Neuvillette, this dude is straight up like Blastoise if it were a handsome 2D man. It seems like for the most part, Neuvillette is going to be revolving around his Hydro Orbs and spamming a lot of that Hydro Cannon. For a character that scales off of HP and is also classified as a Hydro DPS, yes, we're getting another DPS, but it seems like he will be contesting for that oh sweet Hydro DPS role in a couple really popular teams. But I do want to point out, it seems like even within the special program, they did showcase him more so with Dendro than traditional Hydro DPS such as Tartaglia with his international team. I do think Hoyoverse has gotten to the point where they realize, goddamn, Tartaglia is a little too evergreen. But, you know, we only need one evergreen character, and thank God it's the oldest Hydro DPS character released to date. So I think it's safe to assume that Neuvillette will have more synergies with the Dendro characters, as remember, they need to make sales for the Dendro character reruns as well going forward. So making Neuvillette a new character synergize really well with relative new characters is going to be a good wave moving forward for them to get that good old sweet Benjamin Buckaroos. So for you guys watching, is Neuvillette worth the poll? Now, understand, if we're gonna strictly compare Neuvillette with Wriothesley, I do think that Neuvillette feels a little more valuable just because of his Hydro element. Now, remember, both of these characters likely will get some sort of benefit upgrades once Full Solar comes out. So it's not to say that this is going to be the end-all be-all verdict, but also because of Neuvillette's role within the story. Yes, their roles and involvement with the story matters to a certain extent, so it wouldn't be surprising to me that Neuvillette comes out vastly on top due to his involvement with the Lord. Now, a lot of people would point out, but Walrus, didn't you say in a few videos ago and also previously in podcasts that popular characters or characters that are more in demand tends to be weaker than characters that just comes out of nowhere and are essentially dark horses? Yes, and that statement still stands. However, when I categorize Neuvillette within this new region, I feel like maybe he is more akin to someone such as Alhaitham, but there could be the chance that he ends up as someone like Cyno as well. Because remember, Cyno played a major role in the lore. He had a very powerful and esteemed position within the Dendro region, within the academia. So with Neuvillette being the supreme judge of Fontaine, it's not to say that his position is going to guarantee him strength, right? So don't get that confused. But after looking at the live stream and maybe lucid dreaming here and there, it does seem like he will slot a little closer towards Alhaitham's role in terms of power and strength, because right now Hoyoverse needs to make sure they're making back some good buckaroos due to the lackluster sales for 3.6, 3.7, you know, what happened during those patches. Game was practically dead by Genshin standards. All right, so Neuvillette, Hydro DPS, scales off of HP, super important character within the lore, and he's not really contesting with Tartaglia and even Ayato in terms of how his Hydro DPS is going to be played, which is very smart of Hoyoverse. You should never have two 5-star limited characters really straight up competing with each other. That's just terrible for their strategies of selling reruns, right? So Neuvillette seems to be leaning more towards that Dendro playstyle, but it's not to say he cannot play in any other team, but it's safe to assume he is going to be difficult to be played in some other teams. All right, so let's not forget, this is a Hoyoverse title and how stingy they have been with characters and their flexibility. Moving on to Wriothesley. Now, this character, friends and family, is really the dark horse, I think, of this region. When the first teaser came out with all the characters, I saw people just drooling over the floor with everyone except Wriothesley. Now, I have said on record that I thought Wriothesley and his little companion girl was really cool, and I thought these two characters were interesting to keep an eye out for because of the low popularity. Fast forward to now, do I think Wriothesley is going to be a competitive character within the game? I think so, because a character such as Wriothesley already had a predecessor. Now, who am I talking about? Hazel, right? But unfortunately, Hazel has been regarded as the most forgotten and underused character when it comes to meta standards. But it's not fair to compare these two characters, obviously one being a 4-star Anemo, the other one being a 5-star Cryo, but we could draw comparisons, right? The failure of Hazel is due to a lackluster 4-star scaling. I mean, how many 4-star DPSs really ends up shining apart from Xiangling and Xingqiu? Both of them are off-field support DPSs, right? So it's fair for Hazel to be underused, and what makes me feel more confident is that Hoyoverse has already played around with this combat style, right? It's even okay, I guess, now to say Hazel was an experiment in preparation for future 5-star DPSs of the sort. So with Wriothesley's combat style, I think it's already going to draw in a lot of long-term Hazel fans who really enjoyed that brawler boxing style, on-hit, quick-hit play style. Now, I think more people are interested in Wriothesley and his future potential, and as well as his role within the meta, I guess. How strong is Wriothesley, Walrus? Well, in my opinion, Wriothesley actually has more flexibility than Neuvillette, meaning that he will likely fit into more teams, simply because Cryo right now, even though Meld has not been fully developed, which is also another point I will touch on, but Cryo actually has very straightforward playstyles and has well-established supports within this category. Understand that because of Meld's lacking and Hoyoverse's continued resistance towards developing this reaction system, they have put in place other characters to assure that Cryo units, especially DPS units, have what it takes to compete at the highest level. Now, Freeze is like the obvious go-to. Even the playstyle with Wriothesley combined with Freeze, you know it's going to clap cheeks. And of course, if you have Shenhe, no-brainer, Wriothesley is likely going to end up outperforming, in my opinion, Neuvillette. Now, yes, Neuvillette, you can close your eyes and play him maybe in like a Super Bloom Nilou team and end up just crushing the game completely. There is that possibility, but just like Neuvillette could be paired with Nilou, Wriothesley could be paired with Shenhe. Now, depending on your investment towards Shenhe and maybe her constellations, you might be able to squeeze a little more out of Wriothesley. Then you can squeeze Neuvillette with Nilou, if that makes any sense. Because Nilou teams have a relatively low ceiling, but they have a very high floor as well. That's kind of the strength of Nilou. So I guess it's not fair to say that Wriothesley could piggyback off of characters such as Shenhe without mentioning Neuvillette's potential to piggyback off of characters such as Nilou. Personally, I do think that Wriothesley's playstyle is just so refreshing. It looks so cool, and I would love to be able to get my hands on one, but you guys know I'm saving for the Hydro Archon, and if it means sacrificing some handsome husbandos, so be it. But I do think if we're strictly talking about meta-wise, it seems like you should just go for Neuvillette, but Neuvillette just looks, in comparison, more bland and boring. Yes, he's Hydro, yes, he's handsome, but I mean, like, blasting water onto the enemies versus just literally kickboxing your enemies to death with cyberpunk gloves. I mean, am I just biased, or I find Wriothesley's playstyle so much more engaging? And in an era where Genshin Impact really is struggling to keep up with endgame content, I mean, who am I kidding? Genshin Impact never cared about endgame content to begin with. You need to find interesting ways to play the game for yourself. And I think Wriothesley will end up selling simply because of the difference in combat style versus traditional DPS characters. Now, let me know in the comment section who you're going to be pulling for and why. And until the next one, urge you to stay safe, peace, and bye-bye.